This story time how I found out my boyfriend lied about his age. At the time, I was 15, and I found out he was 32. By the way, we're calling him Jake. So I met Jake at a college party, and I was able to go because my sister had just entered college, and I begged her to take me. So I had fun. I ended up meeting Jake, and from there we started talking. He told me he was still in college, and of course I told him I was still in high school. At the time he told me he was 18, and he slightly looked older, but I guess he just looked older for his age. And I know we weren't supposed to date at these ages, but my dad was 5 years older than my mom, and I didn't think that it was that bad being 3 years apart. We were together for 10 months. When my birthday came around, he wanted to take me out on a date. He picked me up from home and drove me to a restaurant, and 5 minutes before we get to the restaurant, he gets pulled over for not having his lights on. The cops asked for his ID, he showed the cops, and he put it down. I took a look at his ID, and it said he was born in the 1980s. It gets really bad after this. Let me know if y'all want a part 2. This is part 2 of how I found out my boyfriend lied about his age. At the time, I was 15, and I found out he was 32. So like I said earlier, he had got pulled over by the cops, and he asked for his ID. When he had got it back, he had put his ID in his cup holder. I took a glance, and I saw he was born in the 1980s. When the cops left, we drove off. Then I asked him, Jake, how old are you again? He's like, 18. Why'd you ask that? I picked up his ID and pushed it into his face. He quickly steps on the brake and snatches it from me. I was like, take me home. He said, no, it's a fake ID. I was like, what do you need a fake ID for? Where's your real one? He looked at me in shock. Then I told him I wanted to leave. I try to open up the car door to leave, and he tells me, you're not going nowhere. Guys, this is when it gets really scary. Y'all let me know if y'all want a part 3. This is part 3 of how I found out my boyfriend lied about his age. At the time, I was 15, and I found out he was 32. Okay, so like I said before, I saw his ID, and I could tell he was lying about how it was fake. So I immediately wanted to get out. I try to open up the door, but it doesn't open. I told him to let me out. He responds, you're not going anywhere, and you're not leaving me. I then start pushing on him to get me out. He stops and says, if you keep pushing on me, we're going to crash. So I grabbed my phone and I called the police. He took my phone and threw it out the window. And I'm like, where the hell are you taking me? Guys, this is when it gets really dangerous. Y'all let me know if I should make a part 4. This is part 4 of how I found out my boyfriend lied about his age. At the time, I was 15, and I found out he was 32. So I tried to call the cops, and he took my phone and threw it out the window. I didn't know what else to do, so I just started throwing hands. And in the process, he ended up hitting the car in front of him. He created a big dent in the back of the car, and the car in front stopped. And the guy in the car jumps out and starts yelling at Jake. I start waving my hand for help. He backs up and runs back to his car. I was confused at first, until I saw the police arrive 5 minutes later. So I guess he had called the police. When the police had got there, they had patted Jake down, they asked questions, and investigated the whole car accident. They asked me questions about what happened, and I told them. I ended up having to tell my parents. We had to go to court. Jake, on the other hand, went to prison. The whole situation was weird, and he lied throughout the entire relationship. After everything was over, I learned my lesson with guys like him. I now do background checks on any guy I date. This story time is how my boyfriend got my sister pregnant. At the time, I just graduated college, and I moved into an apartment with my boyfriend. My sister at the time was 2 years younger than me, and she was still in college. But she ended up dropping out because she said school wasn't for her anymore. My parents were upset that they had paid for school, and she dropped out in the middle of it. So they kicked her out, and me being the older sister, I let her live with me and my boyfriend until she got back on her feet. My sister was also depressed at the time, but me and my boyfriend would always cheer her up. As weeks went by, she ended up getting a job at Target, and she helped pay for some of the bills towards the apartment. One day when she gets back from work, she comes into my room saying that she wasn't feeling well and just passed out. She wasn't waking up, so I took her to the hospital. When we got to the hospital, they told us that she was pregnant. Part 2 will be up soon. This is part 2 on how my boyfriend got my sister pregnant. So like I said earlier, my sister passed out and I took her to the hospital, and come to find out she was pregnant. I was happy for her, of course, but she never told me she was seeing anyone. When we got back home, I asked her, so who the baby daddy? She jumps and she's just like, some guy from school. I said, some guy got you pregnant? And I bust out laughing. She told me it wasn't funny. Then I asked, so who is he? She said, we don't talk no more, and ran into her room. I let it go, but I noticed something was weird. Couple weeks later, one night my boyfriend leaves our room to go to my sister's. I get up and I listen on to the conversation, and he's basically trying to convince her to get an abortion. So I walk into the room, very upset, and I ask him, why is he trying to convince her to get an abortion? And I notice he's giving her a stack of money. Part 3. Part 3 of how my boyfriend got my sister pregnant. So I walked into my sister's room and my boyfriend is handing her a stack of money, telling her she should get an abortion. I start yelling, "What are you doing?" My boyfriend says he's just helping her out. I scream, "Why are you trying to have her get an abortion?" Then my sister interrupts and says, "We need to tell her." She looks at my boyfriend. I'm just like, what the fuck is going on? She tells my boyfriend, "We gotta tell her." I'm like, "Tell me what?" My boyfriend says, "Nothing. There's nothing to tell you." My sister just says straight up, the baby is his. I sit there for a second, and then out of nowhere, I just black out. I attacked him until my sister pulled me off. I went to our room. I packed up my things. I took my boyfriend's clothes, put them into a tub, poured bleach on them, grabbed my things, and left. A couple months later, my sister had the baby. It's now been 2 years, and I still haven't spoken to either my sister or my ex-boyfriend. Story time of the most dirtiest college roommate ever. By the way, we're calling her Jessie. So I moved in before Jessie and I get settled and decorate. The next day, she comes and throws her bag on the bed, then leaves. I thought it was weird because she didn't even say anything to me. Couple hours later, she comes back and I'm like, hello? And she's like, "My bad," and comes give me a hug. She smelled very bad. She starts unpacking all of her clothes and blankets, but they smelled like mildew. Anyways, a week later, there's this party going on for freshmen, and she goes, but I stay in because I had a migraine. I told her that when she comes back, can she keep the light off? Now it's 2 a.m., and she comes back in very loud, uses the bathroom, then goes to sleep. And now I'm up, so I got up to use the bathroom too. When I sit down on the toilet, I feel something very squishy. It was dark because, like I said, I had a migraine. I get up, turn the light on, and I was sitting in her shit. This story time is from a follower, and she wants advice. By the way, we're calling her Dana. So Dana has a best friend, and we're calling her Trinity. They have been best friends since first grade, and they plan to do everything together, including going to the same school. So right now, they're in 12th grade, and they wanted to go to the same college, but Trinity hasn't been doing well in school. Dana tried to help her, but she wasn't doing so great at tutoring. Trinity was failing her math class, but 3 months later, it seemed as though Trinity grades were coming up. She noticed Trinity getting good grades, but without knowing the actual work. One day, Dana had lost her phone and used Trinity's phone to call her phone to find it. Out of nowhere, she get a text saying, "Hey, baby," and Dana's confused because Trinity never told her she was talking to anyone, and they tell each other everything. She jokingly went through the messages to see what they were talking about, and come to find out, she was talking to her math teacher. She thinks it's weird because their math teacher is almost 40, but she don't know what to say to Trinity to get her to stop. Y'all coming down. This story time is from a follower, and she really needs advice. By the way, we're calling her Imani, and she's 16. So Imani has been with her boyfriend, Devante, for 2 years. He was her first boyfriend and first love. They met each other's family, and they were attached by the hip. Everyone always assumed that they were going to get married. They were like soulmates. Until one day, Imani wanted to leave the relationship. She said she wanted to meet other people and experience other things. But first, she made the decision on staying with Devante forever. Devante was upset at first because he really only wanted her, but he had to let her go because that's what she wanted. So after 2 months of being apart, Imani realizes that she didn't want anybody else but him. Devante was happy that she was ready to come back. So after 7 months of being back together, Devante was hiding news that he was keeping away from her. During their breakup, Devante is with another random girl who was a stranger, and now she's 7 months pregnant. Imani feels like it's her fault because she thinks that if she never left, then that never would have happened. Give her some advice down below.